Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. Yo, I didn't expect LSU to win the national championship this year. If we go back to the summer, my feeling about this team was their ceiling was 8-2. I thought that's where they would be. I thought they had six layups, and then 4 games that were 50-50 games, and if they could split them, I think that would be great. That was their ceiling. That's what I thought they would be. Around 8-2. I can handle losses. I can especially handle losses with a young team, with new coaches, new coordinators, so much talent gone to the draft, COVID year, opt-outs, all of that. I can handle losses. If you're playing hard and sometimes the ball bounces left instead of right, you're not the better team that day. That happens. I mean, in the 126-year history of LSU football, 127-year history of LSU football, really in the modern era anyway, they've had 2 undefeated seasons. 1958 and last year. That's it. They're going to lose games. It's just the way it goes. But the way you're losing right now in piling up historically bad benchmarks every week is in every way unacceptable. Mississippi State passed for the most yards in a single game on you. Have you watched what Mississippi State has done since? That is the greatest indictment on this team. They've not won a game, and they were just shut out by Alabama. Everyone has with ease stifled this offense, which you allowed to set an SEC record. You let a freshman from Missouri throw for 406 yards and 4 touchdowns on you. And on Saturday, you suffered the worst loss in the history of the LSU-Auburn series. The 37 points was the largest margin of defeat in the history of this series. And it was your worst loss since 1996 when you lost to Florida in the Swamp. Please stop telling me about COVID. Please stop telling me about opt-outs. Please stop telling me about everybody you lost in the draft. Because when I look at that defense, I see senior Neil Farrell, senior Glenn Logan, JUCO transfer Ali Gay, senior transfer Jabril Cox, guys like Damone Clark and Micah Baskerville who have waited for their turn, senior Jacoby Stevens, All-American Derek Stingley, 5-star number 1 player in the country Elias Ricks. I see freshman phenoms like B.J. Ojolari. All of the guys I just mentioned have Sunday aspirations and Sunday talent. You have NFL talent on that defense. And that doesn't mean you're going to win every game. But there is zero excuse to lose by 37 points and to allow a pedestrian and erratic Bo Nix to throw for 300 yards and that offense to run for 200 against you. This is, might I remind you, the same Auburn team that lost to South Carolina. Yes, the South Carolina team that you hung 52 on just 2 weeks ago. Now, I want to be clear about something else. I've seen too many y'all knuckleheads say, they wanted to ordain TJ Finley. Told you he wasn't the guy. It would not matter. I'm going to be very clear about this. It would not have mattered if Tom Brady, Joe Montana, or Jesus Christ were playing quarterback for LSU on Saturday. Finley was sacked 4 times. He was hit 5 times, had 2 passes deflected, and LSU ran for 1.2 yards per carry. LSU's offensive line got its ass collectively kicked on Saturday. And the defensive line wasn't any better. It wasn't a banner day for Finley. Happens. The turnovers, could live without him. He made one really bad throw. The one that was high and wide to Marshall that ultimately ended up in a touchdown. Would have loved to have some more ball security on the time when he got popped and he fumbled. Scoop and score. But even still, TJ Finley didn't give up 48 points and 500 yards to Bo Nix. We'll talk about the quarterbacks later. The bottom line is these players either cannot execute or will not execute for Bo Pelini and Ed Orgeron. Either or. That's evident. You have enough talent, not to win out, but you have enough talent to compete in every game on your schedule. Yet you're suffering historically bad losses. And when the head coach talks about it, continues to say, we're making the same mistakes over and over again. When you're making the same mistakes over and over again, that's no longer on the player. That's on you, Jack. That's on your inability to get these players to do what you need them to do in order to have success. It's not the NFL, so you can't go get new players. You can't check the waiver wire. You can't trade for somebody. The roster you got is the roster you got. So you're at an impasse. You're no good. Your team doesn't care. And a week from Saturday, the best team in college football is coming into your building with an axe to grind after you beat them a year ago in their place. And oh, by the way, you've still got to go to College Station. They may have something to prove. And Gainesville, whose coach walked into a press conference dressed like Darth Vader and incited a riot on Saturday. And those teams are actually going to be playing for something by the time you play them. If you think Saturday was rock bottom, you've still got 5 more games. So what do? Y'all know that I'm the guy who I don't call for people to be fired. I don't think that's my job. But similarly, last week, when we're having conversation and we were talking about quarterbacks, I said a week ago, I'd ride with TJ Finley. I think clearly he is the better talent. I would ride with him and take my lumps and grow that way because long term, I think my ceiling is better with that guy. Now, I don't think that's what Ed Orgeron is going to do. I think as soon as Miles Brennan's ready to go, he's going to play. Similarly here, it sounds as though, and Ed Orgeron talked about it after the game on Saturday, where he said, we'll evaluate our staff after the season. I don't think he's going to make any staff changes. But there's one thing, there's one thing that in my mind would actually get this team, the 2019 LSU Tigers, to increase their level of performance, to zero in and play to their max potential defensively, which they're not even close to doing right now. And that is moving on from Bo Pelini and elevating Corey Raymond to defensive coordinator, because this much I know. I'm not on the practice field. I'm not in meeting rooms. I'm not in the locker room. I don't know what these players say to each other and among each other about Corey Raymond, about Bo Pelini, but actions speak louder than words. And I know, watching them through 5 games, that they're not playing for this guy. They're not. And if it's Bo, Ed, combination of them, whatever, they're not playing for this defensive staff. What I also know is that every one of those guys would bust their ass for Corey Raymond. And I know he's never been a defensive coordinator, and I don't think Ed Orgeron is going to do it. But if you want one thing that would inject life and get every one of those players to zero in, fire Bo Pelini today and elevate Corey Raymond to defensive coordinator and see what happens. You don't think that would work? 2016. Arguably the most talented team Les Miles had. Jamal Adams, Leonard Fournette, Darius Geis. Look at that team. Devin White. Go look at that 2016 roster. They lay down against Wisconsin. They're listless against Auburn. Les gets fired. Ed comes in. First game. Record number of yards put up in an SEC game against Missouri that day. Go back to 1999. LSU quit. Talented roster. Talented roster that quit on Jerry DiNardo and Lou Tepper. They lose to Houston. They fire Jerry. They promote Hal Hunter. Hal starts Rohan, and LSU blew the doors off of Arkansas, who won the West that year, by the way, in Tiger Stadium. Don't tell me a change like that wouldn't get this team to elevate its play. Now, we can talk a lot about COVID, and we could talk about the $80 million revenue loss, and we could talk about the money in the buyout you'd have to pay Bo Pelini and all that stuff, and I get it. But anyone that's ever owned or operated a business also knows the saying, you got to know when to cut your losses. If you're driving down a road that's a dead end, you can keep driving because you don't feel like turning around, but you're ultimately going to get to that dead end, and you're going to have to turn around eventually anyway, whenever that becomes. This team in 2020 is going nowhere. They're 2-3. They got at least 3 more losses on the schedule. You hope they can find a way to beat Ole Miss and Arkansas and somehow get to 4-6. That's what you hope. Is that good enough? Maybe. If it is for Ed Orgeron, they'll stay the course. And then they'll evaluate at the end of the season. But if you want to fix this now, to maximize 2020 for whatever it can be and start pointing the ship in the right direction, make the change today. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.